Have you ever stopped to think about how our modern world, well, became so modern? Imagine a single domino falling, way back in the 1700s. And that one little push starts a chain reaction that ends up building steam engines, creating massive skyscrapers, and connecting the entire globe. That is the story we're going to dive into today. How a revolution in power started an industrial domino effect that literally built the world we live in right now. It's a story all about power, people, and production.
Just to really get a sense of how massive this change was, try to picture life in 1700. The entire world was powered by muscle, either yours or your animals. Your whole life was local, tied to the farm. Now contrast that with today. We're living in sprawling cities, powered by machines. Your phone, your clothes, the food you eat, it could all come from 10 different countries. The jump between those two worlds is just staggering. So how on earth did we do it?
Well, it all starts with the first, and you could argue the most important domino of all, a total revolution in how we create and use power. We're talking about the game-changing shift from muscle to machine.
And this right here, this is the spark. It's the idea that a machine could do the work of a person or an animal. I know, it sounds super obvious to us now, right? But back then, this was a totally radical concept. It first got going in England, and it set off a chain reaction that would reshape the entire planet. Seriously, everything we're about to talk about happens because of this one breakthrough.
And man, this idea spread like wildfire. It started in England and a few neighbors in the mid-1700s. But within 100 years, boom, it jumps over to Germany and the United States. And by the early 1900s, it's a full-on global thing. This wasn't some slow, gradual change. It was an absolute explosion of industrial progress.
So where did these brand new factories actually pop up? Well, it wasn't random at all. There was a very clear industrial logic. You needed power to run the machines, so you built next to fast-flowing rivers. You needed fuel for the steam engines, so you set up shop near coal mines. And of course, you had to ship all your stuff out, so you had to be near a canal, a road, or a harbor. It was this perfect triangle of resources, power, and transport.
Okay, so the first domino falls, and it immediately knocks over the next one. This new machine power didn't just change how we work, it completely changed where we live, and it sparked one of the biggest and fastest human migrations in all of history.
So what caused this huge movement of people? It was basically a perfect storm. First, new farming techniques meant you needed way fewer people to grow the same amount of food. Then, at the same time, landowners started fencing off common land. They called it enclosure, which basically kicked farmers off the land they'd worked for generations. With no land and no jobs, millions were pushed out of the countryside and pulled toward the one place that had work, the new factory cities.
And the sheer scale of this is hard to wrap your head around. Just take London, for example. In 1800, it was already a huge city for its time, with 1 million people. By 1900, its population exploded to 6 million. That's a 500% increase in just 1 century. And it wasn't just London. This story was happening in industrial cities all over the world.
Now, obviously, you can't cram millions of people into cities that fast without creating some pretty enormous problems. Sanitation was totally overwhelmed. The air was thick with smoke from burning coal. But here's a pattern you see again and again. Crisis leads to innovation. The fear of disease gave birth to modern public health. And as cities ran out of room to grow outwards, new inventions like the elevator and cheap steel let them grow upwards. And just like that, the skyscraper was born.
Okay, domino number 3. These new factories and giant cities were like a massive, hungry engine. And that engine constantly needed more fuel. This hunger for resources and new places to sell things would have huge consequences for the entire globe.
And how did these industrial nations feed that engine? Well, the main way was through colonialism. That's the practice of a powerful country expanding its control over other territories all around the world, basically using their resources and their people to fuel its own economy.
This created an incredibly profitable and, let's be honest, a deeply exploitative economic loop. Here's the basic idea. The industrial countries would take cheap raw materials like cotton or rubber from their colonies. They'd ship them back home to be turned into finished goods in their factories, and then, get this, they'd sell those finished products right back to the people in the colonies. It was a perfect system for generating incredible wealth, for the home country, that is.
Now, let's push open the factory doors and take a look inside. Because the next domino wasn't just about global trade, it was about totally revolutionizing how things were actually made. This is where we see the mastery of mass production.
And the system that came to define this era is famously known as Fordism. Its genius, and maybe also its curse, was the assembly line. The product, maybe a car, would move down a line and each worker would do one single, repetitive task. Attach a wheel, tighten a bolt, put in a window, over and over and over again.
The impact was just incredible. Production speed went through the roof. All of a sudden, things that used to be expensive luxuries could be made cheaply for everybody. But it also completely changed the nature of work. You didn't need a skilled craftsman anymore. You just needed someone who could do one simple thing very, very fast. This model was so efficient, it became the blueprint for manufacturing all over the world.
And that brings us to the final domino, the one that takes the logic of the assembly line to its absolute limit and brings us right into our world today, the rise of automation. You might call it the ghost in the machine.
This whole thing is driven by what economists call the substitution principle. It sounds fancy, but the idea is simple. If you can replace a human worker with a machine or a robot to do the same job, you do it. You can draw a straight line from the very first steam engine replacing a horse all the way to a modern robot replacing a person on an assembly line.
And the real-world numbers on this are just jaw-dropping. Check this out. In the US, between the mid-80s and 2015, the total amount of stuff being made in factories actually doubled. But, and this is the crazy part, in that same time, the number of people working in those factories went down by a third. So just let that sink in. We're making twice as much stuff with way, way fewer people. This huge shift has created what some people call a post-Fordist world. The factory jobs that are left are totally different. Instead of doing one simple task, the workers who are still there are often highly trained specialists who manage the complex robotic systems and keep the whole automated line running. So, we've followed this chain of dominoes all the way from a steam engine that replaced muscle power to a robot that replaces a human worker. That first big revolution was all about machines making us physically stronger. But the revolution we're living through right now is about machines that can amplify our brain power. And that leaves us with one really big question. What's the next domino to fall?